All right, let's get right into it. We're all chasing happiness, right? But what if the way we're chasing it is completely backwards? What if all the things we think will make us happy, like tons of money, big successes, or just thinking positive all the time, are actually pushing it further away? Today, we're going to unpack the really surprising science of what actually makes a life feel good.
Just let that sink in for a second. In 1997, this guy, Billy Harrell, wins $31 million in the lottery. I mean, that's the dream, right? But just 2 years later, right before he took his own life, that's what he said. It's a totally shocking thing to hear, and it really cuts to the heart of what we get so wrong about happiness.
And this is where the story gets even crazier. So on one side, you've got Billy Harrell. He gets all the money, all the stuff he ever wanted, and it completely broke him. Then, on the other side, you've got Christopher Reeve, the actor who played Superman. In 1995, he had this horrific accident, fell off a horse, and was paralyzed from the neck down. Just a terrible, terrible tragedy. And yet, Reeve later said that his accident actually helped him appreciate life more. He said things like, "I can laugh, I can love, I'm a very lucky guy."
So this brings us to the biggest question of all, the one we're going to tackle in this whole explainer. How on earth is that possible? Well, research actually shows that about a year after the event, lottery winners are often no happier than they were before. And incredibly, people who've suffered accidents, even paralysis, report pretty similar levels of happiness too. So if what happens to us doesn't decide how happy we are, what does?
Well, to find the real answer, we first have to kind of wipe the slate clean. We got to get rid of all the myths we've been told, because honestly, most of what we're sold about happiness is just not true.
Let's just bust these myths one by one. First up, happiness is not the same as pleasure. Yeah, good food, a new gadget, a great vacation, those things feel awesome, but the feeling doesn't last. As the writer Mark Manson says, pleasure is a false god. If you just chase pleasure, you usually end up more anxious and unstable. Second, the idea that you have to lower your expectations to be happy? Nope. Actually, a lot of joy comes from the struggle, from trying to do something hard, even if you don't succeed. And finally, happiness is not being positive all the time. That's just exhausting. Pretending negative emotions don't exist is super unhealthy. Life goes wrong sometimes. People tick us off, and being able to accept that reality is actually key to a stable, happy life.
And that brings us to the absolute key. It's not the destination, winning the lottery or becoming paralyzed, that sets your baseline happiness. Decades of psychology research point to one thing. It's the feeling that you are the one driving your own life. It's that sense of control. People who feel like they're in control are just happier, period, no matter what their circumstances are.
Okay, so how do you get that sense of control? Well, it all comes down to what we can call the validation equation. And it's all about one question. Where do you get your sense of self-worth from?
For a lot of us, probably most of us, our main source of validation is external. We look for it from other people. We want the likes, the compliments, the promotions, right? We need other people to look at us and say, hey, you're doing a good job, you're successful, you matter. And this visual just nails it. Look at the right side. That's the external validation loop. Your sense of who you are is constantly being fed or starved by what other people think. It's shaky, it's unstable, and you have zero control over it. But then look at the left. That's the internal validation loop. It's totally self-contained. It's a source of good feelings that you generate all by yourself.
And this is really the fundamental choice we all face every single day. Are you living your life based on a scorecard that other people are keeping for you, or are you living it based on your own?
So this is the other side of the equation, the superpower, really. Internal validation. It's that confidence you build from the inside out. It's about setting your own standards and then living up to them. It doesn't need an audience, it never runs out, and best of all, it is completely under your control.
So let's go back to that driving analogy for a sec. Internal validation is that feeling of having your hands on the steering wheel, of choosing your own road. External validation, that's just arriving at some fancy destination somebody else told you was cool. Yeah, the fancy hotel is a nice perk, but the real lasting happiness comes from the act of driving your own life.
Okay, and this brings us to a huge, very modern problem. Because nowhere is this battle between internal and external validation more obvious than on social media. It pretty much forces us to choose between actually living our lives and just performing them for an audience. I mean, this image just says it all, doesn't it? This is the quiet, kind of desperate scream behind every perfectly filtered photo, every carefully crafted status update. It's a raw request for that external validation that our modern world pretty much runs on.
See, when you're performing your life, your main focus is on how it's all going to look to other people. Your mood goes up and down with every like and comment. But when you're living your life, the focus is just on the experience itself. It doesn't need to be posted online to feel real, and your self-worth isn't up for a vote. It's stable because it's coming from you.
And what's really fascinating is that studies show people who almost never post on social media aren't like antisocial hermits. They usually share a bunch of really powerful traits. They tend to have strong internal validation, they care more about real connection than performing connection, and they just don't feel the need to compare their life to anyone else's. Their silence isn't emptiness, it's actually a sign of a really strong inner world.
And this really gets to the core of it. There's a fundamental conflict between being fully present in a moment and packaging that moment up for everyone else to see. The second you think, ooh, this would make a great Instagram story, you've pulled yourself out of the experience. You've become the director of your own life instead of the star. You've stopped living it, and you've started performing it.
So, okay, how do we fix this? How do we build that inner scorecard and start relying less on the applause from everyone else? Well, the answer lies in reclaiming our privacy. And I don't mean hiding from the world. I mean using privacy as a tool to strengthen our sense of self. Here are 3 concrete things you can do. And these come from Mark Manson's work. First, take responsibility, not for what happens to you, but for how you respond to it. The simple shift takes you from being a victim to being in charge. Second, set and achieve small goals. I mean really small. Every little win sends a signal to your brain that says, hey, I'm in control. I can do things. And third, just constantly question your motives. Before you do something, before you post something, ask yourself, am I doing this for me, or am I doing this to impress someone else?
So let's really reframe how we think about privacy. It is not about being a hermit or shutting people out. It's about having sovereignty over your own life, your own experiences. It's that clarity you get when you realize you don't need everyone to see you, to know that you exist and that you matter.
And that leaves us with one last question to chew on. Why have we become a culture that feels this constant pressure to turn our lives into content? What do you think would happen if you let a beautiful sunset, or a delicious meal, or a personal victory just be yours, and yours alone? The answer to that question might just be the start of a quieter, but a much, much happier way of living.